Now, Democratic Congressman Peter Welch, who was part of the congressional delegation that went to Cuba, and Cuba expert Ana Luis Bardak, who has interviewed Fidel Castro and is the author of Without Fidel. Congressman Welch, what is your reaction to what the president had to say last night?
I think it was great. You know, Senator Rubio may not like normalizing relations, but having 3 days in Cuba with Senator Leahy and Senator Durbin, I can tell you this, the Cuban people are really excited. I mean, we spent 2.5 days walking around Cuba, interacting with Cubans all over Havana, and they were so excited. They saw our Cuban American flag lapel pin and came up and talked to us, and there's a great deal of excitement there. The second thing is the argument that the opponents are making is that this is a reward to Castro. It's in fact a threat to Castro. I mean, you have trade, you have travel, you have transportation, you have interaction, you have open internet. This is the dynamic that has to get going in order for the Cuban people to have a shot at opening up that society and having a more democratic government. So I can see why Senator Rubio is against it, but the Cuban people clearly are quite excited about it.
And why now? You know the Castro approach to government, and having spent real time with Fidel, why did the Castro brothers come around now?
Because they had to. They had no choice. Their biggest ally is Venezuela, which Maduro, who the president, is in a very wobbly condition there. They didn't know if they had years or months or even weeks with Venezuela, which provides a huge economic subsidy to the island of Cuba, 100,000 barrels of oil every day. And the laundry list goes on, which they have helped them with. China, not available really to be a patron. The Russian ruble, you know, collapsing. This is economic necessity. Now, that doesn't mean it's not the right thing for America to do. After 50 years, as President Obama said, of doing one thing that hasn't worked out, you might want to try something else. But in terms of the Castros, and I think they made that demonstrably clear by making sure there was a Soviet spy ship in the harbor on the very day, they made it clear. They are reluctant partners. They have resisted this, contrary to conventional wisdom, for some time, because there are questions of, you know, what will this do to the reign of the Castros? Serious questions.
So, Ann, you don't see the spy ship as a coincidence?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Nothing that happens in Cuba and with the Castro family is coincidence. Everything is carefully choreographed, certainly nothing of that scale. It's just to say, look, guys, at the negotiating table, if this doesn't work out with us today, you know, remember, we still have the Russians very interested. We have opened Lourdes, which is their spy station, literally on the island, which is very capable of surveilling the United States to a certain extent, and they're sending a signal. Now, look, at both sides have indicated on day one that they're tamping down expectations. Roberta Jacobson said, look, we're restoring, we're reestablishing diplomatic relations, but we are not normalizing, which she indicated and said that's going to be a very long process. And the Cubans on their side said, look, don't think for a minute that this is going to change the status quo with our government. We are run by the Communist Party, and that is the way it's going to be. So they both parties said day one, you know, beware. You know, this is the hard part. Tomorrow is going to get harder, and they each have a list of what they want, and we'll see by the end of the day what's achieved. But it's exciting.
Congressman Welch, to restore diplomatic relations, we're going to need an embassy. We're going to need an ambassador. Obviously, you need to confirm an ambassador. But what other legislative action is necessary for that? Does there have to be a specific appropriation for that embassy in Havana?
Well, we actually have a big building down there. We have the residence of our resident agent down there who would be called the ambassador if we had normalized relations, and we have a big quote interest section which could be the embassy. So we actually have property. It's not a big deal there. It's really much more a political deal here. Mm-hmm. And really, the fundamental question for us is whether we think hands off the policy of non-engagement is going to work, or the policy of engagement is going to create a dynamic that gives the Cuban people more of a shot at changing their own government. And the Castros, by the way, they are tough. They have no interest in relinquishing power. And I'll give you an example. When we were there with Senator Leahy, good friend who's done a lot, brought home Alan Gross, when we were expecting a meeting with Raul Castro, that was suddenly canceled when we told them we were meeting with Cuban dissidents in advance. So they had this enormous reaction to the mere fact that Senator Leahy was insistent that we hear from all sides. So they're on lockdown there, but this is not about us trying to do regime change. It's trying to give the Cuban people more access to information and some of the tools they need, and economic opportunity that may help them make determinations about their own future.
And what about the reaction in Florida, among the Cuban community in Florida?
It's mixed. It's generational. The younger generation, the newer, Cubans to Florida are very enthusiastic. The older generation tends to be very either unhappy or wary. Although everybody is exhausted by a half-century Cold War. I mean, so there is this tremendous, or really Fidel fatigue, as it were. But yes, look at certain of these items, like getting an ambassador, is going to require Congress, and we have 8 members of Congress who are definitely not going to be helpful in any way. We have 3 Cuban-American senators, any which can put on a hold. So I don't. I think there's going to be a lot of change in Cuba. Immediately, you have a huge amount of money flooding into Cuba, right away from people sending remittances. But, yeah, there's going to be a lot of tough work to do in Washington.
Congressman Peter Welch and Louise Bardock, thank you both very much for joining me tonight.